Gabriel Carrillo, welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. I'm super excited to have you here. I'm a big fan of your podcast, EdTech Bites, which hopefully we'll come back to in a minute. So I'm looking forward to everyone who's listening today to hear about that, to hear about you and all the amazing work that you're doing to support educators and students. But before we jump into that, Gabriel, so I'm going to start this conversation with the most important question that you're going to get today. We ask every one of our guests this question, and really it helps to set a tone for the rest of the interview. Quite frankly, it's the question that our listeners want an answer to. And as a foodie, Gabriel, I hope you'll appreciate this, but when it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yes or a no?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have this argument, I don't want to say all the time, but I've had that argument with people all the time. Oh, it's disgusting. Yeah. It's not traditional. Man, you take a look at any pizza made in North America and it's probably not traditional.
Right.
But I mean, life is about, the yin and the yang, the sweet and the savory. And what better combination than, pineapple and ham?
I can't argue with that, man. I'm pro pineapple. I like to believe that our listeners are as well. So good job. You're starting off on the right foot. Actually, since we're talking about food, this is a hard question, just like to put you on the spot, but maybe this time of the year where you are in Texas, what's the go-to meal that you're looking forward to for a dinner right now? Like what's getting you excited about thinking about food right now?
The weather is really nice here in Texas. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. The weather's really nice. Yesterday it was about 93, 95. The day before, same thing. Fahrenheit for those of you.
Thank you.
95 Celsius would be but it's grilling weather. And we do go out a couple times during the week, because we have 2 teenagers and we're running around taking them to band and things like that. So those quick meals, they do the thing. You get your quick fix, if you want to call it that. Yeah. But there's nothing like a homemade meal. Yeah. And for us at home, man, if we can just cook something together as a family and share it as a family, that's golden right there. That's anything and everything I've ever, I as a parent, as a husband would ever want. So if I can grill for my family at home, whether it be some grilled chicken, whether it be, I made some steaks a couple weeks ago that were just delicious, some tacos. So I don't necessarily have a go-to meal, but I have go-to people, my family, and the go-to place I would definitely say is at home, especially right now during this whole quarantine. And, we're on the tail end of it with everyone getting their government tracking devices. I'm sorry, not their vaccinations in their arms and all that good stuff. So I don't necessarily have like a go-to place or meal. For me, the go-to is the table across in the other room with my 3 other favorite people in the world.
I love that, man. That's a great answer. Yeah, it's less about what's on the table, more on who's around the table, right? I mean, I do want to keep it on food for one more second. I don't know if it's the same thing as San Antonio, but one of the things that has fascinated me about Austin, about me wanting to go there, aside from the culture and just booming and tech and everything right now, but I've heard there's a lot of taco trucks for like breakfast tacos. And I love the idea of a breakfast taco. Is that a thing in San Antonio as well? Or is that very
huge? Awesome? It is huge. Anywhere you go here, anywhere you talk to, it's all about the breakfast taco. And everybody knows the best place. Oh, the best place is here, the best place is there. And for those of you who've never had a breakfast taco here in South Texas is traditionally a flour tortilla and a thicker than usual flour tortilla. It's maybe about a 6-7 inch diameter and getting all mathematical now. So you can figure out the circumference in the area. So it's a thicker than usual flour tortilla. I'm not from Texas. I'm from San Diego, California, where corn tortillas reigned supreme. And when you did have a flour tortilla, it was thin. So here it's a little bit thicker. And for breakfast, you can get egg and bacon, egg and potato, egg and cheese and chorizo and sausage and country sausage. And they do a whole lot with it. And I will tell you this from my background, it's not traditional Mexican food, but it's good food. It is really good food, and you'll find really good tacos. I hate the word best. You'll find really good tacos at the most bizarre places, gas stations, trucks that pop up on the side of the road. So yeah, it's a big culture here. And anyone who you talk to will always tell you, if you want the best one, go here. But you know what it is? Have one here, have one there, have one everywhere, and then you decide. But to me, what makes a really good breakfast taco is the salsa. So I kind of judge places based on their salsa. So I like a green salsa. And if I can't get a good green salsa, which is a charred, they char the tomatoes, they char the onions, and they char the peppers. So when you blend them together, you get like specks of the black char, and it's got a smoke in it. My mouth is watering already. Yes. To answer your question, to make the short story long, yes, it's big here.
Cool. I appreciate you taking us on that journey, Gabriel. Clearly, I should not record these episodes before breakfast because it made me very hungry. Okay, so Gabriel, with season 1 of this podcast, what we did is we spent a lot of time interviewing industry professionals, the CEOs, hiring managers, trying to uncover what are the 21st century skills? What are these core competencies that they're looking for when they're building out their 21st century teams? And now we have a pretty good idea of what they are and kind of what those skills look like on display in the workplace. With season 2, as you know, we're bringing it back to the classroom. So we're talking to educators like yourself to uncover all the amazing ways to amplify the voice of the educator to figure out how they are developing or empowering their students to develop these skills in their students. So actually, before I ask you for your answer to that question, Gabriel, I haven't even given you a chance to introduce yourself. We know you're in South Texas. We know you enjoy a good breakfast taco, but who are you and what are you doing for work right now?
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is Gabriel Carrillo. I'm an instructional technology specialist here in San Antonio, Texas. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm not a native of Texas or San Antonio at all. Born and raised in San Diego, California. Spent some time 11 years actually in Phoenix, Arizona, and then decided to move out here going on 5 years ago. So all I know is education. I've been a paraprofessional, a substitute teacher, a full-time classroom teacher, a dean of students, an assistant principal, an instructional technology specialist. And this is kind of my calling right here. So all I know is education. And, I basically dedicated everything I do in my life to helping those who help our students, because I've got 2 children at home, and the way education's going and the attitudes that sometimes our kids bring home about school and what's happening at school. And I think more importantly, what's not happening at school, that just kind of drives me more to make those culture shifts within classrooms, one classroom at a time.
Appreciate everything you're doing, Gabriel, and appreciate you sharing that story with us here. And again, for everyone, it's EdTech Bites. It's an amazing podcast. Check it out. We will link to it in the show notes as well. So to bring it back, Gabriel, okay, so you've worn all these different hats. That means you're going to have a great answer for this. But what is something you've done over the years or noticed or supported your teachers in doing over the years to empower students to develop these 21st century skills so that as a teacher listening to this on the drive into work right now can hear the idea, borrow it, steal it, and bring it back to their classroom?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan and just overall believer in less is more. Our kids have been given homework like you wouldn't believe, where to the point where the idea of a 10 or 12 or 13 or 16-year-old at that has no social life because they're buried in a Chromebook, they're buried in a book, or they're buried even worse in worksheets, which we know work great, right? I mean, worksheets save lives. So one of the things that I did when I was a 5th grade teacher is I ran my classroom using the stations model, and trying to plan for 3 or 4 different groups for language arts and math can be daunting. So what I did is I said, okay, what can make my life a little bit easier? And that was my goal. What can I do to make my life easier? So I decided less is more. Instead of giving them 10, 15 math problems to do for homework for 3 different groups, I'd give them 3. And then that turned into more of the critical thinking stuff. And as I progressed through the years, and more importantly, as a tech coach, instructional technology specialist, ed tech specialist, 21st century learner, digital learning coach, whatever you want to call it, whatever your institution titles this position, it's basically the same thing. Mm-hmm. What I coach teachers and tell them all the time is, what is more important? The kids showing the work on a sheet of paper, or giving you the answer, or filling in a bubble, or clicking something in a Google form, or for you to see and hear them talk through and really show you the computational skills and the critical thinking and the problem solving skills orally or through video. So I'm a big, big fan of take this one math problem, dissect it using a tool like Flipgrid or the camera on your phone or some other tool or the voice recorder. Tear down that problem as a student, explain your thinking to me, and explain how you got that answer. Or even more importantly, give the students the problem and the solution and have them get to it, or say, hey, this solution is incorrect. Jimmy calculated the percentage of this total, what have you, and came up with this. The answer is incorrect. Explain why he is incorrect in his thought process or his computation or what have you, or the algorithm or concept.
Sure,
so
sure.
I'm a big believer in less is more, but also emphasizing the more with the critical thinking, because as we know, companies, tech companies, any company at that, they're not worried about whether you can do X, Y, and Z. They're worried about a couple of more important things, which are, can you work with this group of people? Can you think critically on your own? Can you problem solve? And can you communicate with your colleagues? So those are the big four things that they're looking for, the 4 C's that we see everywhere on social media and that, but we need to start tapering back what we're asking of our students as busy work, especially stuff to take home, and think of what's the best bang for our buck. So if I was to give any teacher something to borrow or steal, it's start thinking about less is more and have them explain their thinking a bit more. That way you get to hear and see what their thought process is.
I love that so much for so many reasons. And, oftentimes I'll follow up the example with, that's great, but how to make sure it's not one more thing? This is actually the complete opposite. You're taking away, right? Less is more, not taking away for the sake of just take away, but to replace with something that's that much more valuable. Yeah. If you answer 10 questions, it's not that helpful to me to know that you can get 10 right. It's actually more helpful to me to know how you figured out how to get those 10 right. Cause that's communication, to your point, right? Like if you're on a team, you can't just submit the thing you need to hand in at work. You need to also be able to explain that to the team, communicate it, collaborate with your peers, problem solve when you don't know the answer, and then communicate how you're able to problem solve. So that's an amazing way to wrap it up all into one. But actually, and you're going to win so many fans from that, right? Like not only is it amazing for teachers to say, oh, okay, I don't have to come with 10. I can come up with 3 things and then have so it's less work for the teacher and less work for the student too, in theory, right? So
less work, but more thinking involved. And one thing that I forgot to mention, I think one of the more important factors in that entire statement, or rant, as you would call it, as some people would call it, is that, let's say you do give a kid, or you give your class 15 math problems, and half the students do the first one wrong. They're probably going to do the next 14 incorrectly. So they have basically taught themselves the incorrect manner to do it, and trying to have them unlearn something and learn it again the correct way is 10 times more difficult than learning it right the first time. So do yourself a favor and think of less is more.
Could not agree more. Actually, Gabriel, I'm such a fan of that answer that congratulations, you've now been promoted to superintendent. So maybe your 10th role in the district, right? For at least the next 10 minutes. Okay. And what you've been tasked with immediately is, and we just talked about a bunch of them, but you have to, for the sake of this conversation, pick one of these 21st century skills, one of these core competencies that every one of your graduating grade 12 students needs to display evidence of in order to graduate. If you had to pick one, which one are you picking?
So if I was a Super Nintendo of a school district, I would definitely go with problem solving. They need to show problem solving. I just had this conversation on episode 85 of my podcast, which I can't believe I didn't even plug, but thank you for doing that, Damien. It is the EdTech Bites podcast, available on all podcast platforms. So I had this conversation with some friends, some people that I'm connected with from Podcast PD, Chris Nessie, AJ Bianco, and Stacy Lindes, about EdTech pet peeves. And one example that I gave is, I was giving professional development, like tech development, if you want to call it that, on a specific tool.
Yeah.
And a teacher got a pop-up on their screen or got a notification or something when they were trying to create their account or what have you. And from 30 feet away, that teacher turned the laptop around and said, "What do I do?" I said, first off, I can't read that from 30 feet away. Second, what does it say?
Yeah.
Click here to choose your account. I'm going to go with choose your account. How about that for the win? So that's an example of the problem solving. And my counter argument to that is, if I'm that teacher and admin gave me documents that needed to go home for the parents, and I handed those documents out to the students and said, guys, put these in your book bags, put these in your binders, and make sure that you get them home to your parents. And the students were to ask, what is it? What is it about? As the teacher, what would you probably say? Why don't you take a look and read it? You know, so that same teacher it's kind of not practicing what they preach. So a lot of times our own children have those moments. I don't know how to do this. I can't figure this out. I don't know how to create an account for that. Colleges, in my opinion, used to be institutions of where we used to go to learn information.
Right.
That has now become YouTube. You can literally Google anything. I mean, if you can't figure out how to use Flipgrid, you don't need to go to a professional development. You can probably Google it, go to their website, go to their YouTube channel, and you can figure it out in 5 minutes. And that's that problem solving, is when you're confronted with something that is a minor roadblock or speed bump in the way of you getting the specific task at hand done and complete. Are you going to stop in your tracks, or are you going to dissect what's in front of you, figure out what the roadblock is, and use your resources that you have available to solve that? So that's the big one for me, because to me, that's something that's called life.
Yes.
You know, we use the term real world. Oh, when you get out to the real world, I'm sorry, they're already in the real world. They're getting the real world pop-ups on their phone. They're getting the real world problems at home with their parents and their siblings and things like that. So we need to start teaching our children more and start building our competencies in the classroom around the problem solving, you know, and that goes back to that less is more. And if I was a superintendent, and I would really push for the problem solving in our district, because that's what builds you the Bill Gates. That's what builds you that's going to foster the student who's going to create the next iPhone. Yep. Who's going to figure out the electrical grid here in Texas so that it doesn't go out and we have another snowfall or what have you. So that's what we need to figure out, is the problem solving, and to take it a step further, the problem finding. That way we can have the problem solved later.
That's super interesting, Gabriel. I mean, what I took away from that is, you're right. You know, these tools that we're building these days, especially in 2021, a lot of them are pretty easy to use if you just sat down and took a second to try to figure it out, right? So maybe instead of the product specific tech PD, it's problem solving PD, right? Let's work through some problems as teachers to figure out how to solve it, because obviously if they can't do it, they're not going to be able to teach their students how to be problem solvers as well, right?
Correct.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Gabriel, let's swap and do some rapid fire questions for you. So what's a life skill that you weren't taught in high school, but maybe that you wish that you were?
I would probably have to go with financial literacy. Yep. I really wasn't, I mean, other than that economics class I took my last semester of high school, I didn't dive deep into, I wasn't forced to dive deep into savings and interest and compounding interest and things like retirement accounts and thinking big picture versus now. So I say that because my oldest son, when he took the 7th grade, I believe it was 7th grade, the 7th grade end of the year state assessment here in Texas, he excelled in personal finance. And it made me think, I don't remember doing that as a 13-year-old. You know, I came across that almost as an 18-year-old. Yeah. And gosh, had I learned those skills, had I learned, you know, marginal propensity and things like that, Google that for those of you who don't know what it is, because I'm working with a teacher and I had to Google it just 2 days ago to figure that out. So I definitely say financial literacy.
It's a great answer. Yeah, it's most common answer. I mean, after graduating high school, I went to post-secondary and just got a credit card, but no one had talked to me about it before, right? And there was a lot of, luckily I was fine with it, but there was a lot of students who just weren't, right? You're just given this card that seemingly has an unlimited amount of money for an 18 or 19-year-old, right? So yes, we're getting better at this. Congrats to your son. That's clearly evidence of it, but still a long way to go.
Yeah.
Gabriel, you have a billboard. Let's say we put it right in front of the school and you can write one thing on it. Every student's going to see it on the way in. What does it say?
Ooh, I would probably say one of the statements that I kind of spew out of my mouth all the time is probably practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. If you practice something incorrectly over and over, it's not perfect. Maybe you've perfected the wrong way of doing it. Hence those 15 math problems. You know, you do it over and over and over. You've perfected the way to do it incorrectly. So practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. That's what I would say.
There you go. I like that. Okay. IQ or EQ? If you could only pick one, which one are you picking?
EQ all day.
Yep.
EQ all day.
Gabriel, did you have a favorite class in high school?
I excelled in lunch. I did have a class that I enjoyed a lot. It was the communication class. I took it. I don't remember exactly what grade it was, but the communication where we learned how to speak, how to do some public speaking, the do's and don'ts of creating a speech and giving it. And I think I gave my first real big speech to a class of my classmates in that class.
Such an important skill, and probably was an elective, right? Like I wish that kind of stuff was something that everybody had to leave with, right? So let's talk about books. So what's a book that you've read that's had such an impact on your life that maybe you wish you would have read it from a younger age?
Probably the 7 Healthy Habits of I couldn't think of the rest, but that one stands out. And believe it or not, The Art of War, Sun Tzu. Short read. Yeah. And gosh, packed with nuggets, man. If you want peace, be ready for war.
Have you ever checked out the 7 Highly Effective Habits for Teens?
No, I have not. Did not even know that existed.
Yeah. I have not read it. I've seen it. I think there's a few kind of offshoots now, but I know I'm a huge fan of the 7 Highly Habits. Like, it's a great book. Actually, I was given it as a gift from my older brother, probably when I was in high school. And, you know, I read it. I don't know if I applied it as much at that time, but Sharpen the Saw, number 7, is stuck in my head, right? And that comes back to your practice. Mm-hmm. All right. So you have a magic wand. You can change one thing about the education system as we know it today. What would you change? I would change the requirements for curriculum and how it's given, how it's delivered, how it's executed. Stand and deliver doesn't work. We preach, do this, do this, do this, but we sit through staff meetings on how to do it in conventional ways versus the unconventional way, which is actually practicing what you preach. So I would like to see more of the blended learning environment, and just probably, you know what else I might do? I might add some recess to the secondary students. Cool. That's one thing that both my kids say they miss a lot, is the recess. And even if they're not out there playing, they're outside, they're walking, they're talking. Kids have 4 minutes to get from one class to the other, you know, upwards to 5, depending on the school system and district. But kids need to see each other more. Kids need to interact more. And because that's what they're going to do at their jobs. That, and there's so much science about taking a break, right? Like everything on LinkedIn this past year is about why you should turn away from the screen and just stare into the trees for a few minutes, right? And just shut off. So it makes a lot of sense. Start the grill, right? Yeah, that's a great note to end on, actually, Gabriel. So I hope you get out to the grill. I hope you make something delicious. But again, more important, who you're eating with and what you're eating. Let's bring it home. We talked about the EdTech Bites podcast. We'll link to it in the show notes. But where can people go to learn a bit more about you and all the amazing work you're doing right now, Gabriel? Absolutely. So I am on social media. You can catch me on Instagram and Twitter with the @EdTechBites handle. So it's @EdTechBites, BITES, not BY. You can catch my website at edtechbites.com. I'm also on Clubhouse. If you look for @EdTechBites, I'm on there as well. And also doing a little bit more of the video podcast, just like this, on the YouTube channel. So you can check out the YouTube channel. Just search for EdTechBites on YouTube. So pretty well with the branding. So if you just look for EdTechBites anywhere, you're probably going to find me. There you go. Gabriel, I can't thank you enough again. We'll link to all those amazing links in the show notes. Have a fantastic dinner with the family, fantastic weekend, and looking forward to talking again. Hey, one of these days, if we do meet in person, we got to hit up some breakfast talking, man. Nothing would make me happier, honestly. All right. Have a great day. And thank you very much for thinking of me and having me on the show and connecting with me.